autistics up to 80%, she may not be the only supportive professional whose good intentions are hindered by a lack of autism understanding. So think about our schools. They're aware of autism, not surprising. As we said earlier, the CDC's stats say that 1 in 68 people may be on the spectrum, so that's not surprising. We have some wonderful teachers, but they are not required to have any kind of autism education to teach us, and that doesn't always work out so well. So for instance, because of those fine motor problems I mentioned, I've used a laptop for all written work since I was 10 years old. And when I was in grade 9, a teacher asked me to write a unit test with pen and paper. And I didn't do very well on that test, even though I was usually an honor student, because I can't compose responses well that way. So my mom asked that I be allowed to retake the test using my school-issued laptop, and the teacher said no. Not understanding that assistive technology eliminated my barriers to learning and put me on a level playing field, he wouldn't allow it. And supports are denied for reasons beyond a lack of understanding. I've been doing autism workshops for 13 years, and I frequently hear from parents who say that the school won't give their kids supports because there's not enough money to go around, or there are other kids who need it more. Well, here's what I think. The challenges of speaking autistics will be recognized when we get the right supports and respected and supported. And the strengths of non-speaking individuals, as I mentioned earlier, will be honored and appropriate curriculums and supports will be developed. All autistic children will get what they need in school year after year, which will help prepare them for adult life. Now, if we can agree that there's work to be done, where do we start? Well, I have 6 exciting ideas. Number 1, let's consider changes to teacher degree programs to include understanding the needs of autistic learners. Number 2, let's develop individualized curriculums to match our strengths and then tailor the speed and volume of work to match the pace of the student. Number 3, let's shift understanding with public awareness campaigns featuring autistic individuals and highlighting our strengths and diversity. Number 4, let's have both speaking and non-speaking people featured in those campaigns, shattering the notion that those who can't speak have nothing to say. 5, let's make changes in law to ensure that autistic students get what they need in school year in and year out, and that supports are not determined by how the board decides to spend its budget. And finally, let's support employers who develop autism hiring practices. With research suggesting autistic employees are loyal, productive, and good for the bottom line, everyone benefits. So that's a short list, but an ambitious one. Can we do it? We can. These kinds of changes, based in understanding and acceptance of autism, will mean future generations of autistic individuals will be able to grow up with their self-esteem intact, believing in themselves, and confident in a future that can include them. Perhaps they'll be able to experience introductions that don't humiliate them, but instead honor their humanity. And maybe they'll go something like this. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a writer, a workshop facilitator, and an autism advocate. Okay, so society doesn't really know what it means to be autistic. It's not very nice how we're treated, and it's just not fair. But seriously, it's time to turn that casual awareness into action. This is not just a tisk, oh, isn't it sad that those poor autistic people are understood? Tonight, let me share the consequences of not understanding and accepting what autism can mean for those of us without intellectual delays as we transition to adult life, and provide some ideas for change. So let's start, because society, your lack of concern here, and I mean the general you, it's killing us. As adults, this is what we have to look forward to. Those sky-high unemployment rates I mentioned, a life of dependency and social isolation punctuated by chronic anxiety and depression, an average life expectancy 18 years lower than average, and death by suicide at 9 times the rate of the rest of the population. Not acceptable. Why are these things happening? Well, good news, everyone. The answer is not so elusive. Can I suggest why we have failed to raise autistic children to become adults with competence and confidence to live their lives to the fullest? Well, since I'm from Canada, I'm going to put this in the most polite way possible. Autistics are not being taught what we need to learn in order to succeed in adult life in a world dominated by non-autistic people. Thus, both the problem and the solution lie with our schools. So while it's critical that we use all of our resources as a society to help autistic people who are struggling with unemployment, loneliness, anxiety, and depression, I want to examine the positive changes that we can make in our schools to ensure a successful transition to adulthood for those children who are still in school and those who will be one day. As it stands now, schools misinterpret the unique qualities that can accompany autism. They assume that if we can speak and have average intelligence, then there's nothing wrong with us. Well, yeah, we never said there was anything wrong with us. We said we're autistic. There's a difference. And really need respect and programming in school that is diagnosed around the core features that got us diagnosed. Social communication difficulties, restricted interests, sensory challenges, and our unique ways of thinking, for example. Our differences from the ordinary are invisible and don't affect other people so much, so they're ignored, missed, or not accepted. The thing is, differences can extend to many areas of human functioning, and when these are understood and accepted, we can do quite well, thank you. And when not, our mental health and self-esteem can take a large hit. I'll try to explain. So autism is a pervasive development disorder, which means that we can develop on a different timeline than others in areas like communication, social interactions, managing our behaviors, things like that. So this is why we need to be taught differently and may take longer to learn, but teachers lack the training in order to teach us based on our learning and processing differences. The speed and volume of the curriculum, along with the sensory and the social demands of school, mean the whole thing can just get overwhelming. These challenges commonly mean that we are corrected, redirected, chastised, and embarrassed in every setting by everyone dozens of times a day. We have eyes on us all the time, constantly catching us when we make a mistake. And with this constant oversight, we learn from a very young age that, again, who we are is not good enough, that our basic instincts are wrong. Our peers and staff roll their eyes at us, exasperated, frustrated, and angry. And the teachers don't understand our sensory experiences that make us, say, get too close in your personal space, the social approaches that lack finesse, the executive functioning issues that might mean that we can be late or disorganized or forgetful. And so, from a young age, many of us go to bed at night worrying about all the social blunders we've made this day and wake up the next day wondering how we're going to screw up again. What a way to live, right? Unintentionally, schools are chipping away at our self-esteem. Fortunately, we can turn this around by determining to do better and considering new ideas for change, including some of the points that I mentioned earlier. We can change teacher degree programs to include understanding the needs of autistic learners. We can provide individualized curriculums to match the students' needs, and we can ensure that supports are available year in and year out. So these programs for teachers will mean that all of them will understand our unique way of thinking and how to accommodate for things like slower processing, perseverating on things, awkward social approach, challenges in understanding nonverbal language, sensory and motor differences, and things like executive functioning challenges. They'd also learn about many other features that can impact our day-to-day experience. So that can mean what it means to have a communication disorder. They'll know the long and short-term impact that difficulties in social interaction can have on us, anxiety, depression, isolation, and work hard to facilitate friendships and increase our social currency in the schools. They'll be experts in approaches that work best for us, so they'll become fluent in what's called errorless teaching, which is because we know that we can be very sensitive to being edited or corrected or told to do something again, so they'll find ways around that. They'll know that a behavior issue is really a lack of understanding issue or a lack of support issue. They'll be kind, calm, and very creative, knowing that the more rigid and inflexible the student, the more flexible the teacher must be. Now, despite lacking expertise in autism, many teachers do go above and beyond for us, and I'd like to add that when these teachers work closely with our parents, the school experience can be much better. Thank goodness for parents, honestly. Luckily for me, in my darkest hours, when I felt like life was just too hard and I just felt like I couldn't go on, I had a case manager, a crisis counselor, motivational speaker, cheerleader, teacher, social convener, educational advocate, fashion advisor, occupational therapist, and executive assistant who wouldn't let me give up on myself. That person is my mother. She always found a way to pull me back, give me hope for the future, and help me to stand on my own 2 feet. Parents, seriously, all the difference in the world. But getting back to my high school years, school was very hard for me. Because of anxiety, mornings were always a gong show. My mom had to prompt me through every step of my daily routine, often stopping to help me through panic attacks. And I often needed assistance of school staff just to be able to enter the building. Many days, I didn't think I could go on. On one such day when I was 14, I sat in my vice principal's office, knees drawn up to my chest, rocking and chewing the neckline out of the t-shirt that I'd stretched over my legs. And I felt the flush of prickly heat on my face. As I sat with vacant gaze, unable to move, unable to speak, my mother, with one word, told Mrs. Redpath what was causing the problem. School. School demands were too fast and too much. The homework, the noise, the chaos, the bullies, they were more than I could cope with. And I could see no way out of my wretched situation. So my VP first gently offered support for my suffering and then got serious. So she held out her hand like this and said, "Daniel, you look at this opportunity and you see the word stop. From where I stand on this side of the sign, I see options. If you're having a rough day, come and see me. I'll give you a quiet meeting room to relax and do your work. And if you're having too tough of a morning and can't get to school, you're a great student. Take the day off and take care of yourself." And then she added, "No matter what problem comes up, the three of us can find a solution." As she spoke, I slowly unfurled, stopped chewing, stopped rocking, and looked at my mother with something other than fear in my eyes. That meeting was a game changer. I had options. Through 4 years of high school, I stayed home due to anxiety only twice, but I, of course, continued to suffer with it. The options she gave me relieved stress and made a big difference. So yeah, there are many creative, caring educators doing what they can for those of us on the spectrum within an imperfect system. Luckily, there are many such teachers, but finding them should not be a matter of luck. Let's work with our governments to change the requirements for becoming a teacher so that anyone allowed within 10 feet of our autistic children knows how to help us. Once we change those programs, we'll have the staff to be able to deliver individualized curriculums. These will match the speed and volume of work with the student's ability and focus on developing their strengths and supporting their areas of need. The current status quo couldn't be further from this model. Right now, diploma-bound autistic students are forced to do curriculums that are made for typical kids. Juggling multiple responsibilities, trying to pay attention amid the sensory overload and the social demands can be overwhelming, and that's not going to help them when they're trying to learn how to transition. It can leave us exhausted and anxious, or worse. Well, to paraphrase author Paul Collins, the problem with trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole is not that the hammering is so much work, but that in the process, you'll destroy that peg. So how would these individualized curriculums work then? Well, here's some ideas. Mandatory courses like math, English, phys ed will be decided on an individual basis. These personalized and flexible curriculums will allow students who are experts in American history but can't do math, or who are exceptional writers who can't do science, to still be able to thrive and to do well in the areas that they're great at. And they'd be able to go to post-secondary if they chose. You know, we don't want the brilliant mathematicians and the great minds of our time not to be recognized because they couldn't graduate high school with the typical curriculum. Provide engaging credit courses every year to address the core differences in autism. Courses that teach body language, emotional recognition, facial expression, and perspective taking. That'll help us to address the social communication differences that are so critical to adult life. Sensory and motor issues are not a sidebar in autism, as are up to 90% of us have differences in these areas that can contribute to our emotional states or behaviors. So if we create credit courses that teach us about things like sensory processing and self-regulation, it can give us valuable tools for managing our emotions in the world. Now, I have a lot of sensory issues. I was a real hand flapper as a kid. You know, anytime I was really excited, I'd be going flap, flap, flap like crazy. But I've learned to suppress it by doing other things with my hands, clenching my fists and that kind of thing. So sometimes, though, if I get really excited, if something really happens, I just go crazy and I start flapping like there's no tomorrow. And I guess I am going to have one wild honeymoon one day. Employability skills will be taught every year of high school, pairing typical teen mentors with autistic teens in work placements. No autism curriculum would be complete, of course, without teaching life skills. Many of these credit-based courses would go a long way to helping us. It is essential to address areas where we lag behind. Personal care, meal planning, cooking, housekeeping, money management. Yeah, as adults, we're kind of going to need to know that if we're going to be successful. Our lack of skill in these areas is preventing successful independent living. If we develop courses also that are based upon our interests, we're going to have more success. We do well when we see the value in what we're doing. And challenging us academically in areas of extreme interest can help us prepare for future careers. So things like the history of video games, or meteorology, or anime art, animal care, Star Wars. Tie the work somehow into things that we're interested in, and we're going to get a better result. And as an added bonus, there will be peers with common interests in those classes, so that will help in initiating social interactions. Our areas of specific interest are very common in those of us with autism. I'm sure many of you know that. And if nurtured at home and school, it can go a long way toward helping us develop a career. So that's how I became a public speaker, for instance. I showed this knack early in life, and it's kind of morphed into this. Here's the family folklore. I was a painfully shy toddler who avoided toys, other kids, and barely spoke. When I did, it was hard to understand me because of poor articulation. And one day I found a toy microphone at a garage sale. I marched to the center of the driveway, stood tall, and belted out a rousing rendition of Blue Suede Shoes. In a big voice, enunciating every word. I was 3. Who knew I could sing? Well, not my mom. She was stunned, and then somewhat frustrated in her attempts to get me to repeat the performance later. She soon came to understand that the microphone was the magic. Like Michigan J. Frog, I just stood there like a lump, blinking my eyes and staring straight ahead. And once she realized that the microphone was the key, she found every opportunity to get me on stage. Weddings, funerals, anniversaries, that kind of thing. I spoke wherever I could, and speeches were written, and I delighted in delivering them. Soon, she was using my strength to help me get through school. In grade 9, when academic and social demands were getting a little too overwhelming, it upset me that teachers seemed afraid of having someone with autism in their class. Either that or they were afraid of dealing with my mom. I haven't quite figured that out yet. Seriously, autism parents rock. Anyway, I was really looping on this, and it was really increasing my anxiety. Enter my special interest and my strength. My mom suggested that I teach my teachers what I needed them to know about me, my strengths and my needs. So if I could create a PowerPoint presentation to that effect, she would get them into a room and I could present it to them. The school supported the idea 100%, and she definitely had my attention now. The staff appreciated the training, and I was able to do this every semester through all 4 years, culminating in addressing the entire staff in my final semester. My public speaking and interest in explaining autism grew from there. And over the past 13 years, I've done keynotes, professional development in elementary schools, high schools, colleges, universities, spoken to doctors, teachers, students, everything. It's really important that all children, especially autistic children, have the opportunity to develop their areas of interest. Some of the finest, most creative minds in the world are on the spectrum. We are represented in the arts, in science, in literature, and technology. And I'm quite confident it'll be someone on the spectrum who finds the cure for cancer. I mean, who else has the focus and the creative problem-solving ability to sit in a lab day in and day out, year after year, to make this happen? I'm sure the CDC knows no one like that. Expert autism teachers and tailored curriculums make sense then, but they must be consistent. We must ensure schools give autistic students the supports that they need and make sure their budgets reflect this. Right now, parents beg for crumbs of support. And when they finally get something that works, when the student is finally doing well, the supports get taken away. Why? Well, because challenging behaviors disappear when we get the supports that we need, and so people think there's no more problem. Well, the support gets pulled, and everything goes back to how it was. So I'm not sure how your school boards operate here, but back in Ontario, each school board presents their education laws in their own way. The supports vary from board to board and school to school, and so what do? Well, what we can do is make changes in law so that law has to be interpreted and applied equally. Let's take responsibility away from any teachers that don't understand autism. And when a support is challenged, let's leave it to a panel of autistics, parents, and professionals who understand autism to make a decision. Make sense? I think so. By ensuring that we're taught by those who understand our differences, who deliver curriculums that are right for us and in the right way, we can graduate students who can thrive as adults. We can and must start now. Let's reimagine our school supports to make sure future generations of autistic children have the life skills and social communication skills to transition successfully and thrive in adult life. Of course, it would be naive to think that our education system is the only one that needs an overhaul. Family doctors, for instance, get very little education in autism, besides specifically how they can diagnose us. And they often give parenting advice based on what's appropriate for typical children. That doesn't work for us. And that's a speech for another day. Now, before I say goodbye, I wonder if you could do something for me. So for anyone who's able to, I'd like you to stand for a second. Thank you. Now, take one small step to your right. Great. Now back to your left. Okay, perfect. Have a seat. You know, my mom has been telling me the whole time I was writing this that if I want to make an impact, I have to move my audience. So, nailed it! Thanks, everyone. Are we doing questions? Or? Yes.
Several things. One, the advocates here would like a business card. Two, we'd like to see if there's a way for us to get a copy of this fantastic, empowering, very educational speech you got so we can distribute it around the educational communities here in Georgia. Oh, three things the advocates here would like. One, we'd like your card because we really want to be talking with you. If you're still in Atlanta, we want to take you to coffee. Two, some of us are very interested in distributing this fantastic speech for those who are not here because there are some educational communities. I'm working with the school system right now, a parent mentor program, which will be updating as different focus points comes. This material that you just gave, I've got about 5 women I know that want to get their hands on it.
Well, when you put it that way.
They're a little too old for you, I'm afraid. And 3, let's talk on social media. If you really want to find yourself a girl, I've got some places for you to search.
Sweet. Okay, so 3 things. Okay, first thing, business cards. I definitely would love to stay in contact with people. I, being the forgetful autistic person I am, forgot my business cards back in Canada. But yes, I can certainly. We can certainly talk. We can certainly talk afterward. And anyone who wants to get in touch, we can certainly do that. Actually, you know what? Maybe I can just give my email address. Anyone who wants to take it. It's just Autism Goggles, which is our initiative. Yep, I'm gonna write that down. I'm just gonna write that down. So it's our website and email address for our social initiative, Autism Goggles, that they mentioned earlier. We can definitely keep in touch. And I'm so sorry I've lost track of your other 2 points.
Some of the advocates here that I work with and some of my organizations and the contacts want access to this speech if you can have it either in video or on a hard copy, because there are, just as you're trying to make the changes in Ontario, the community here in Atlanta has to start somewhere. And your material, not only does it address the problems, the scenarios, but it also comes forward with solutions and logical results that come from it. As a result, I want to distribute your material to our networks with your name on it. So don't worry, I'm very good at citing sources.
Well,
I'm saying that you have given us, some of our members here, the key, the tool to make a huge wave of change.
Well, you know, I do believe the CDC is recording it, and I think that'll be available publicly. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm not too sure when or how that will be, but it will be.